Alrighty, welcome back everyone to another episode of Articulating with David Barnett. My name is Anna Thornton. I'm the gallery assistant here at the gallery, and with me, as always, is the owner and director of the David Barnett Gallery, David Barnett.
Thank you, Anna.
You're welcome. So today we have a really fun topic. We're going to be discussing how to look at art. And it seems like a simple question, but the reality is a lot of people find looking at art kind of intimidating. They don't know what to do, and they find themselves standing in front of a picture and they just feel stressed out because they feel like maybe they should just absorb the meaning through osmosis, and maybe they've never been given a roadmap for how to look at a picture. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to kind of break that process down and demonstrate how to look at art by looking at some art. So before we actually start diving in looking at pictures, I thought it might be helpful to do a brief overview of the elements and principles of art and design. These are kind of a roadmap for looking at pictures. They break visual art down into its most basic components. So in one category, we have the elements of art and design. And I like to think of these as kind of the building blocks of any picture. We have line, shape, form, color, value, space, and texture. And then in the second category, we have the principles of art and design. And I always like to think of these as kind of the effect that's created by the way the elements are arranged. So in this category, we have balance, emphasis, movement, pattern and repetition, rhythm, proportion, variety, and unity. So for example, an artist might create a sense of unity in a picture by putting the same color in all of the different areas of the composition, so that when your eye moves around the space, you get a sense that, oh, there's this color that kind of unifies the whole composition. So something to keep in mind with these elements and principles is that you won't always find every single one in every single picture. Sometimes an artist will just choose to focus on a few, depending on their kind of desired effect. So, without further ado, David, let's dive into looking at some art.
Very good.
So here we have the title of this piece is Sailboats on Lake Michigan by Francesco Spicuzza. We believe it was created somewhere around the 1920s or 40s. And I wanted to start with this piece because it's a very traditional landscape. There's nothing too crazy or intimidating going on here. It's pretty straightforward. So what we have is a scene on Lake Michigan. There's sailboats in the water. There's this really lovely cloud formation with these kind of rays of light filtering down and reflecting on the water beneath. And I think the use of pastel here is really interesting because that kind of fine powdery texture captures that sense of atmosphere that we're seeing. What elements stick out to you, David?
I think what you were saying before about the repetition of shape and color, and the light that he captures and the diffusion of that, I think is very special.
Yes.
And of course he was famous for his Lake Michigan scenes.
Was he associated with the Impressionists at all? Because what I noticed about this immediately was the color palette and how it's all very soft colors. There's not really dark, deep blacks anywhere. And that was something the Impressionists kind of did.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Really, when you look at it, the darkest area, most of it is fairly light, but then underneath the wave, you have this really deep turquoise color, which creates a nice sense of depth. And we really only see that color in a few areas, so it kind of draws your eye to those spots. And another thing to keep in mind, whenever I look at a landscape, I always try to find where the horizon line is because that centers the image. And there's actually this thing called the rule of thirds. Have you heard of that? And basically it says that the most pleasing landscapes divide a canvas up into 3 segments and then places the horizon line on one of those thirds.
He's almost there with this.
Yeah, he's almost there.
But of course, artistic license permits variation from that, doesn't
Right, it does. But he's offset it just enough that it creates interest, I think.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and the unification that you were talking about before, by the repetition of white, for example,
Yes.
in the composition that you see throughout.
Exactly. We have white in the clouds.
In the sailboats and the sails.
Yeah, and the waves.
Stunning.
It is. Another thing that stood out to me are these little hints of kind of this burnt orange red here. I think that's probably hinting at the sand or rocks beneath.
Exactly.
And I think that red really kind of activates these deep green areas because red and green are complements.
Definitely.
Awesome. Shall we move on to our next picture? Alrighty, now we are standing in front of a painting called Ginger Dog by the artist Robert Richter. This is an oil on panel. And I wanted to talk about this piece because Richter has this unique approach to painting that includes these carved elements. I think one of the struggles painters come up against is how do you add depth to this flat two-dimensional surface. And so he burrows right into the surface and creates all these little textures and designs that adds a real sense of interest to the piece. And this piece is so playful. Every time I look at this dog, he has this kind of crazed expression in his eye. And it makes me wonder, what is going on here? Is he...
Well, it makes perfect sense because this is Robert Richter's dog.
Oh, it's his personal dog.
Well, it was. Ginger.
Yeah.
Ginger is no longer with us. But,
oh, poor Ginger.
But remember now, forever.
Wow.
In his painting.
Yeah. One of the things I was going to ask you, David, is that a lot of times when it comes to looking at art, especially abstract art in particular, but people will look at something and say, if it's visually simple, like these trees here are kind of rendered in an almost stick figure manner. They say something like, oh, I could have drawn that, or my 5-year-old could have drawn that. So I was wondering, in your opinion, what distinguishes an artist's work that's a more abstract rendering from a child's drawing?
Well, so the classic occurrence was when I first started out in business almost 60 years ago, and a client who was a surgeon, and but he never had any art classes or art education classes.
Yeah.
And he wanted to invest in art, and he came into the gallery and he saw a Miro. He looks at the Miro and he says, "My grandchild can do that." And I said, "Well, then you should bring your grandchild, and he's very talented. We'll sign him to a life contract and he'll make lots of money." So, but the distinction that you referred to is the difference between childish and childlike. Picasso always said, if you can keep the childlike quality in your work as an adult, then you've really accomplished something. So, of course, that comes from experience, from looking. But Robert Richter always says, my work is so simple, even a caveman can do it.
Oh, wow.
But if we look at the cave paintings from thousands of years ago, those are highly regarded.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Going back to the quote you mentioned by Picasso about keeping the childishness and childlikeness in a work of art, do you think he put importance on that because there's kind of a purity about childish art, or what is it about that quality that makes something stand out?
Yeah, it's very direct.
Yeah, coming back to this artwork, when I was looking at it, I was trying to figure out what these little shapes were. At first, I thought they were leaves because they're kind of scattered around.
That's what I think.
Yeah. Another thought I had was that they're kind of the same shape and color as the spots on the dog. And then it made me wonder if the dog was
shedding?
like losing his hair. Like maybe it was sick and like clumps of hair were falling out.
Very astutely, what you're saying about repetition of form. Here is a classic example of how he's done that.
Right.
With the leaves and the spots in the snow and the marks on the dog. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It creates a sense of unity.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets you looking and engages you as a viewer because you're putting all these elements together in your mind when you're looking. And, yeah. Alrighty, let's move on to our third picture.
Okay.
Alrighty, now we're standing in front of this lovely painting by Fred Reichman. It's titled After Sweeping the Garden. David, do you want to start us off on this piece by just kind of talking about what you see?
Yeah, so Fred Reichman was a San Francisco artist. He passed away. But I met Fred about 50 years ago in San Francisco. Very kind, gentle soul, and the work reflects his personality, I think. He called himself the haiku artist.
The haiku artist? Why is that?
Because of the poetry, you know. And he was very much appreciated, especially in Japan.
Really?
And actually also in Europe, in Germany. But Fred, like we spoke about before, in terms of what are the most important things when it comes to being an artist and being successful and to create a market for your work and a reputation, you have to have your own style. And Fred is a classic, great example.
Yeah.
Because there's nobody that paints like Fred.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned poetry because the first thing I thought of was this term in creative writing called personification, and it's where an inanimate object kind of takes on human qualities, and I feel like there is something kind of creaturey about the broom with these leaves kind of wrapped around it. You almost get the feeling that it's scuttling across the ground or something.
Yeah, to me, I think of like a walking stick.
Yeah, like those insects. It's interesting too because the background is such an unusual color, and that almost makes me think of the abstract expressionists with the color field paintings because yes, you have this object in the center, but the majority of the composition is just one sweeping color of pink, which is also interesting. And it's not a flat pink either. There's still dimension there in the brushstrokes.
Yeah, and then the shadow.
Yes, the shadow.
Of the broomstick.
Yeah, when I was thinking about this too, is the shadow, a lot of times when we're looking at things in an everyday context, we kind of shortcut and we think light, dark, so shadows are black. But shadows are not black at all. They're actually full of color because they're influenced by whatever they're being reflected onto. And so here we have this lovely kind of muted purple.
Which makes me think sometimes of artists like Winslow Homer, where they use the purple shadow.
Yeah, it's just such a unique piece. And then too, when we're thinking about the elements of design and we're thinking about color, choosing to use that green with that whole backdrop of pink, it just makes the green almost electric. It just stands out because of the complementary nature of red and green.
Also the artist Edward Hopper.
Yes, Hopper was a
Same
master
thing.
of colorful shadows.
Yeah.
Another thing that stood out to me too is that he chose to orient the broom horizontally instead of vertically, because whenever I think about a broom, it's always in a vertical context. You know, leaning up against a wall, or if you're sweeping something, it's vertical. But by putting it in an orientation that you wouldn't normally find a broom, it changes it into something completely different.
That's the title, After Sweeping the Garden.
Yeah, exactly.
Just toss the broom down on the ground.
Yeah, there you go.
Maybe he was tired of sweeping.
Maybe so. So now we are going to talk about a piece called Crossroads by Elena Rose. And so we started out really traditional with the Spicuzza landscape, and we've kind of gotten increasingly more abstract and less representational. And so with this fourth piece, we're going into complete abstraction, complete non-objectivity. And so I wanted to discuss a piece like this because a lot of people find abstract art intimidating because they don't know what the point is. And they're standing in front of something like this and they just feel confused about what they should be doing when they stand in front of it. And I think for a lot of people it's kind of actually a misconception that there has to be a point. Sometimes the point is just to stand in front of it, interact with the piece, and just be in this moment of experience and looking, and just interacting with what you see on a visual level and being engaged. So with this piece, what we're looking at is a lot of bright colors. There's very expressive brush strokes. It's a little bit chaotic. There's a lot going on. What do you see, David, when you're looking at this?
Well, I see, like you're saying, an abstract composition, but some of the elements of design that you were speaking of earlier, the balance of color and form, composition.
Yes. Do you have a particular approach to abstract art? Do you treat it differently from other forms of art, or what's kind of your process?
No, the same.
The same? Yeah. I think the title for this piece is kind of helpful. Not all titles are. Sometimes they're just untitled and it doesn't really give you a reference point, but with this piece being titled Crossroads, I kind of get the feeling that maybe the artist was grappling with some kind of big decision or change, and maybe she's kind of hashing that out on the canvas. So these kind of explosive brushstrokes make sense in that context.
The crossroads being her exploration of the composition.
Right.
She was running herself probably which direction it was going to go.
Exactly.
So sometimes which I think is quite evident in this painting, the spontaneity of it and the freedom of it.
Right.
Freedom of expression.
Yeah, whenever I'm looking at abstract art, I always think about Vasily Kandinsky's approach to the abstract, because he compared visual art to kind of the abstract nature of musical notes, and they don't have to be connected to any kind of words or lyrics to make you feel a certain way. It can just be the way they're arranged. And he was trying to make the point that visual art can function in the same way. We don't have to see any kind of observable subject matter here to feel something. And Kandinsky expressed it better than I can. He said, "Color is the keyboard, the eyes are the harmonies, the soul is the piano with many strings. The artist is the hand that plays, touching one key or another to cause vibrations in the soul." And for me, that's just always kind of shaped the way I interact with abstract art. Instead of trying to decode what's going on, I just try to be really present with the picture. So, any final thoughts before we move on?
I think you've said it all.
So now we are transitioning away from painting and entering the realm of printmaking. So here we have a woodcut by George Robb titled My Window. And what's interesting about switching media is that each medium kind of has its own constraints that pushes the artist in different ways. And so with printmaking, because you're limited on how many colors you can use, it really becomes more about the lines and the shapes and the forms working together. And so what really I find fun is how Rob played with positive and negative space. So positive space, if you don't know what that is, if you look at your hand, that would be the positive, and then the negative is kind of the space around it that outlines it. And so here we have a positive shape of the tulip, but it's surrounded by this black, and we know it's a tulip because of this black space. But then when you look at the black space on its own, you realize it also is a positive shape because it's making up the shape of the building out in the distance. So it's interesting how we kind of bounce back and forth between light and dark, being positive and negative. What elements do you see here, David, that stand out to you?
I think you said it all.
Already? Said all of it? There's nothing left to say?
Well, of course, now the third element actually is, which is a bit unusual, is the color of the paper?
Yes.
Sort of, what color would you call that?
It's kind of a rosy
pink, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so, it's very playful.
It is. I think it adds a sense of kind of warmth and personal nature to the scene, because if it was just in black and white, I think it'd feel a little cold and distant.
Yeah, and then the way he was able to capture the translucency of the curtain through the window.
Yes.
Oh.
And here we see these little speckles of black. That's kind of some maybe residual wood grain from where the paper was pressed down. But it's interesting that he chose to leave those, because it kind of creates a sense of atmosphere or wind, like maybe the wind is coming through and making the curtains flutter a little bit. So that's really successful as well. And going back to the rosy paper, it also maybe suggests a certain time of day, because those rosy hues are associated with sunset or sunrise. Maybe this is the first thing they see when they get up in the morning or something. So, yeah, I feel like printmakers have to be really detail-oriented to plan how everything will work together, because once you print it, that's the final product right there. Alrighty, now we are standing in front of an African sculpture called the Medicine Man. It's originally from the country of Nigeria, and I wanted to include a sculpture in this discussion because sculptures have this added dimensionality of space whenever you're dealing with a three-dimensional object. And you really have to move around to get a full sense of the sculpture, because you can never really see the whole thing at once. So moving around it and looking at it from different angles really becomes part of the experience of absorbing and analyzing this artwork. And what jumps out to me is that there is nothing static about this pose. He is in an action stance. I'm not really sure what he's doing, but I definitely don't want to get in the way of whatever it is. And I'm immediately drawn to this knife. And one question I had was, why is it the sharp side of the blade? To me, it looks like it's facing toward him. Do you have any ideas about why that would be?
Not really.
Then the second thing that I kind of notice about this piece is just the abundance of materials that are used. All the different beads. I mean, that must have taken forever to hand stitch every single one of those. And then I wonder, where did the materials come from? We see these shells.
Cowrie shells.
Yeah, these cowrie shells.
Came out of the ocean.
Yeah, maybe the artist gathered those themselves.
Yeah, in 17th and 18th century, cowrie shells were actually used in Africa as a medium of exchange.
Oh, really? Wow. So there's an element of value in including those. Yeah, and then do you know what this material is along the top?
Not sure, it might be cotton.
Yeah, but it's interesting because, it's woven and it has these kind of cross-hatching designs in it. Yeah, let's move around it a little bit and look at the back. Yeah, so do you think this kind of bare patch right here is that damage that someone tried to repair? Or
That's
what are
a
these?
repair.
Okay, that's what those lines are. Yeah, there's just so much going on with this piece. I have so many questions, like why is the back of his head blue, and why are his eyes kind of like popping out of his head, and what's inside these different vessels that he's holding? And why does he have 4 toes? Did you notice that?
Noticed.
He only has 4 toes on each foot. So, yeah, and I don't really have answers to any of these, but kind of the point of looking at something like this is just to get you thinking and asking those questions. So, any final thoughts?
The mystery of it.
Yes, the mystery. Hey, David, did it have a functional purpose at one time, or was it meant to be kind of a decorative object?
I think that probably most of the African pieces had to do with either life, birth, death, or marriage, life cycles.
Yeah. So it would have kind of commemorated one of those cycles, or?
It could have something to do with somebody with healing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have the medicine man, and then could have had some potions in here.
Right.
And here you've got the bottle stopper.
Yeah.
Bigger than the vessel.
Yeah. Just a really unique piece. For objects that do have a functional purpose, at what point do they become functional objects? When do they transition into artistic objects that get displayed in museums or galleries?
I think that's up to the viewer.
Are there any kind of artistic qualities about this piece that stand out to you?
Well, I think, you know, some of the same elements that you spoke about with a painting, only in 3 dimensions.
Yeah. All right, we are standing in front of our final artwork. I wanted to include a photograph since we're trying to talk about different mediums and how to approach them. So here we have Tom Fertibar's photo, Rock on Mirror Lake. That's part of his Yosemite series. And so right away we see that this is a black and white photograph. So the element of color is not at play here. And because of that, it really becomes about the values that we're seeing. And Tom Fertibar, he actually studied under Ansel Adams. And Adams was known for creating this system of value called the zone system. And there are different zones, so it's broken into 11 different ones. 0 is pure black. Yes, and then zone 10 is pure white. And so everything in between are kind of these gradations of value. And so applying that to this piece, there's these really rich blacks, especially in the tree trunks. And then there's only a few really crisp whites. I'm seeing some kind of on the light reflected on top of the rock here. What elements of value stick out to you, David?
I think you captured it really from the grayscale, from white to black.
Yeah.
And everything in between. I think that's what he's focusing on.
Yeah, he really just makes you realize that there are so many different levels of gray in between pure black and pure white, and just kind of noticing all those different levels of gray is really exciting. And I just love this shape right here. These sharp angles really creates kind of a focal point. At least for me, my eye is drawn directly to that rock.
And the reflection.
Exactly.
You get the pureness and the clearness of the water.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that contrast with how crisp and hard the edges of the rock is, but then in the water it all kind of dissolves and it's really soft.
And the softness of the leaves.
Yeah.
It adds to the drama and the contrast, like you were saying.
Yeah, because there's so many different kinds of trees in the background, and that adds interest as well because they all kind of have their own texture and different shapes of leaves. Now, I wanted to talk about photographs for one reason, because we're talking about looking at art, and for me, when I'm looking at photographs in particular, I don't know why, but I always feel that it's more difficult to connect to a photograph. Even though I know a lot of creative decisions go into making one, I don't know, somehow I just feel like they're more distant. I don't know if other people feel that way, but that was actually a debate for a long time, was whether or not photographs could be included in that category of fine art. And it really wasn't until the end of the 20th century that museums started collecting and displaying photographs.
Yeah, of course, from the time of in early photography, when the French artists like Toulouse-Lautrec and Degas started using photography to capture moments of time for their paintings.
Right.
That kind of got things started and started adding to the importance and legitimacy.
It did. And then fast forward to today, with smartphones, now everyone has a little camera in their pocket, so they can take pictures whenever they want. So I'm wondering what distinguishes a fine art photograph like this from just the regular iPhone photo.
That is a question that will have to be answered by somebody else.
By someone else?
Good question.
Yeah, it's something I think about. I mean, I don't think all iPhone photos could be considered art, but maybe it's the same with all mediums, you know, like not all just doodles are works of art. There has to be.
That's a big question.
Yeah, that is the essential question. So, well, that wraps up this piece. There was one final question I wanted to ask you before we wrap up this topic of how to look at art. I know that kind of developing your eye and looking at art and having the skill of distinguishing the high fine art from things that aren't as successful, or that's a pretty crucial skill for an art dealer. And so I was wondering, because I know you said that you started collecting when you were at age 6. And so I was wondering, did someone teach you how to look at art, or did you kind of just have to figure out the skill on your own, or how was that process for you?
Well, you know, I think that our brains are wired in different ways, and my brain was always wired visually. I was kind of born that way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice for someone who's just starting out and they've never really taken the time to look at a lot of art, but they want to develop that skill?
I think the most important thing is to get out there and go to the galleries, go to the museums, and look at as much as you can, and develop that data bank for your brain of experience.
I agree. Well, if you want to develop your eye, come on over and see us, because we have so many more pieces of art to choose from that you can look at.
6,000, but who's counting?
Well, I hope you all enjoyed this topic. I know David and I had a lot of fun talking about how to look at art. As always, make sure you like and subscribe and follow our social media to stay up to date on all of our upcoming events.
And be sure and come into the gallery when you have time and ask some questions about it. We'll be glad to talk to you about it.
Yes, we will. So until next time, bye.